So, this game was released in parts while it was in early access on Steam in 2018, and I didn't pick it up until after the last episode came out. And it's honestly been a long time since I played a new game that I found as purely inspiring as Dusk, which is a little bit ironic because actually playing Dusk is another exercise in blowing shit up in the awesomest way. The game is made with the Unity engine, which has gotten a bit of a reputation for being the choice for pretentious, low-budget, low-polish, artsy-fartsy pipe dream projects. Which makes sense. The engine can be used for free as long as you're okay with players seeing its logo at startup, which I guess sometimes results in developers paying for the Pro Edition just because they don't want players to get a bad impression right off the bat because the game's made with Unity. Which is hilarious, but also pretty unfortunate because that's not actually the engine's fault. That has more to do with a lot of people just not making very good use of a free tool. I've played a fair share of games made with Unity, like Roshard, Broforce, Among the Sleep, which I've covered before and I'll link in the video description, and Project Warlock, which I plan on covering in the future, and which I bought for pretty much the same reason I bought Dusk. I'm a disgruntled first-person shooter old head who feels like they just don't make them like they used to. Thank God for Unity, though, because I'm definitely not alone in feeling like this, and some of these other people have gotten out there and started making their own goddamn video games. Now, this hasn't been happening in just the indie scene necessarily. id Software's 2016 Doom reboot pretty famously rejected a lot of the baggage the FPS genre has picked up over the years, and instead focused on delivering the essential elements that the series had pioneered. This wasn't even their original intention. Much earlier in that game's development, it was going to be a highly cinematic, post-Call of Duty-styled campaign that kinda looks like a Resistance game at first glance, but at a certain point they scrapped almost everything they had and instead made the game all about killing demons like they should have done in the first place. The end result was fucking awesome and is easily one of my favorite big-budget AAA games in recent years. And yet, while it clearly sends the message that, hey, this is how to do it right and fuck all that dumb extra bullshit, it also kind of implies that the well is dried up just by being a remake imagining boot of the first game. The company basically looked back into its past, said, okay, we know that all of this stuff that a small group of people did 2 decades ago is totally awesome and it works, so let's remake that with the benefit of modern technology and millions of dollars. Dusk can't really take that approach because it was developed mainly by one dude, which just seems insane to me. The game is chock full of nods to other works in the genre, and it's going for a Quake 1 in software mode look, which it nails. I really appreciate this because my computer's awful. That frame rate that you're seeing isn't just my output settings from Sony Vegas, that's just how the game ran while capturing footage. It goes to double that when I'm not getting video, but I still managed to beat the last level while recording because even though I'm broke and I play on a toaster, I can still shoot straight at 20 frames per second, so I guess I'm just better than you? The game is clearly an homage to a bygone era of shooters, where the lack of visual fidelity requires your own imagination to meet the designers halfway by filling in the gaps of what it looked like the artist was going for. On a larger scale, this game's story and setting kind of do the same thing, where, as far as I can tell, nothing really connects logically, but it all kind of works on an abstract and unsettling emotional level. It just constantly throws you up against enemies or into locations that make almost no real-world sense, but they click perfectly on an unconscious Romero-Lynchian level. I'm having trouble describing it, but that's what footage is for, so just look. Also, I really wish there was a level in this game called the Romero-Lynchian level. Probably would have been a decent alternate title for the one called Homecoming, because that one's a brainfucker right there. True to its inspirations, this game does not hold your hand. Oh no. This game greets you with 3 rednecks booking it towards you with chainsaws. And yeah, you're probably gonna take damage and maybe die. But the game isn't really being unfair to you, it just trusts that you have enough instincts to try to protect yourself. The first times you encounter most enemies, they're probably gonna surprise you with some aspect of their behavior. But on the other hand, their behaviors are very simple, and you learn how to not get hurt by them by first getting hurt by them. Then, as you get used to each new enemy type, they start mixing them in with groups of bad guys you're already familiar with, and you find yourself prioritizing targets within the group and adjusting the rhythm of your movements based on the patterns you've learned from the enemies you've encountered so far. This reminds me of something. Hold on, it'll come to me. I just can't quite put my fucking finger on it! The biggest success of this game isn't just that it superficially resembles an old-school shooter, and while I certainly don't want to downplay the look that's been achieved here, I don't think that looking the part would actually be that hard. What's amazing to me is just how much it feels like one. Learning how to deal with each individual enemy type goes a long way to making that happen. But you can also do that thing where you run like a cheetah that's been sipping on Lance Armstrong's tainted blood, and then jumping diagonally makes you go even faster. A lot of areas have Rise of the Triad style jump pads all over the place, which gives you plenty of airtime to try to kill things before you land. On top of that, just for shits and giggles, the Y-axis is unlocked while you're in midair, so you can do somersaults and backflips all while killing people. It's super difficult to get the hang of, not even very practical, and you could go the entire game without ever really using it, but I'll be damned if it isn't one of the coolest fucking shooter mechanics I've ever seen regardless. Even though everything about Dusk's visuals and gameplay is intentionally evocative of Quake, and even though it's an homage to a specific era of shooters, it doesn't seem like it's hung up on being that. The attitude, atmosphere, tone, and whatever the fuck this story is just 100% purely Dusk. And while it does everything you'd expect an intentional throwback to do, it never feels like it's just going down a list and ticking the boxes to satisfy the ornery gatekeepers who will put it under scrutiny if it deviates from their definition of what constitutes an old-school shooter. You know, people like me. No, every single thing that Dusk includes, which is in keeping with the genre, is also an important part of the singular vision of Dusk. And I think it stands incredibly highly on its own merits, even when you don't compare it to the games that inspired it. It really seems like we've come full circle in the last 20-odd years, because the earliest first-person shooters were just these mad little projects put together by small groups of focused individuals. But then this kind of shooter pretty much evaporated in the early 2000s as corporate interests pumped huge, ever-expanding amounts of money, staff, and marketing hype into each major shooter release, which led to a marketplace saturated with flashy, bankable shooters that had no soul. I revisited games like Doom, Quake, Duke Nukem 3D, and Half-Life countless times during those years because as much as I enjoy keeping up with the FPS genre, they just didn't make them like they used to. And yet, Dusk is made like they used to. Dusk shows that that kind of shooter doesn't have to be buried in the past. It's not some cheap grab at your nostalgia that's content to just say, hey, remember liking this? Instead, it revives a long-dead craft, reminding you why you liked these old things by giving you a unique, twisted, and unforgettable experience that couldn't have been made any other way. Whatever. I just really fucking like Dusk. I didn't even mention how satisfying it is killing Klansmen over and over again. Anyways, thank you for watching my review of Dusk. If you found that interesting, maybe you'll be intrigued by a recent series of retrospectives I made on various important game releases from 1998. Just click that button and it'll bring up the playlist. Lots of cool stuff came out that year, hence, you know, the whole playlist. If you like this video, go on, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe if you want to see what I do next. Be sure to click that bell icon to get notifications when I upload. And if you're the super generous type and would like to help support this channel's strange, tortured existence and maybe save me from playing on a toaster forever, I'll provide a link to my Patreon once I figure out what the fuck I'm doing with that and how that works.